Hello, friends, and welcome to the Friday Conversation. We are here, it's episode 102, and we're discussing one of my favorite topics with some of my favorite people. I mean, how can you go wrong? So, we will be talking Grimdark today, and it's always a good time because I don't think anyone can ever really agree what Grimdark is, and that's why it's fun to talk about. No one's ever wrong, so you can say whatever you want. It doesn't matter. So, we'll go down the line, and everybody can introduce themselves. Holly, will you start us off?
I love going first. I'm Holly Tinsley, H.L. Tinsley. I write books that are allegedly grimdark, which is why I'm here to see if that is a correct analysis or not. And I'm looking forward to finally getting the answer to what grimdark actually is.
Oh, maybe all the secrets will be revealed today. The debate will cease to exist. And Joshua.
I'm Joshua. I'm a Grimdark fanatic, and I'm a member of the Page Chewing forums.
Nice. Glad you could join us. And Susana.
I'm Susana Imaginario. I'm a writer, and I have a YouTube channel called
And Jose.
Yeah, I am Jose. I am a reader, and I also run the Jose's Amazing Worlds YouTube channel, and I'm regularly also in the Page Chewing forums.
And this episode won't be live until next Friday. We record a week early, but I just want to say you're killing it with all the interviews. I'm like, wow, you're doing a great job over there. Lots of great stuff.
I, honest to goodness, don't know what I have done. It's all serendipity, and it really is. And I have to say, my wonderful co-host over there, because the last one could have gone terribly, terribly wrong, and Susana was there to save the day. And I'm hoping she'll be there as well in a couple of weeks' time when we have a double World Fantasy Award winner.
Very nice. Yeah, keep it up, and yeah, very exciting. So we're going to start off with what Grimdark means to us, and like we discussed, there's no right or wrong answer. Everyone has a different opinion, and that's why it's fun to talk about. So who wants to go first?
Can I propose Holly?
She likes to go first. I heard so.
Yeah,
I thought so. Yeah.
What? Somehow I felt like I was going to get picked on here. I kind of saw this coming. The answer is, I don't know. And I write Grimdark, so I feel like I should have an answer to this. I think when it comes to Grimdark, the best way I can describe how I feel about it is that it's a flavour as opposed to a genre. So Grimdark, I think most people when they talk about it, they'll say Grimdark like they would say mystery or fantasy. They kind of segment it on its own, whereas I think that Grimdark is a additional flavour added into a number of different genres. Obviously, there are some that it works better for, so it plays very well into the fantasy genre. I can't think of any kind of Grimdark cozy chocolate shop stories. I don't think that would work. But I think it's a layer. It's an element that is layered over a genre that already exists.
All right.
Yeah.
That's
Who wants to go next? Yeah.
Zero preparation for that answer.
Wow.
So that's the best you're going to get at the minute.
I'd hate to be next.
Brain's still warming up.
Nobody?
So I'll go. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
dear,
Susan.
fine. No, go. Grimdark. I was first introduced to Grimdark years and years ago by my husband because he loves 40k, and I don't play the game, but he made me read a few stuff. And that was my idea of Grimdark, and then shortly after, I read Joe Abercrombie's novels, which also marketed as Grimdark, which I thought was much better. And then that has been my idea of Grimdark. And these days, everything is Grimdark, so I don't know if the definition evolved or I guess Grimdark is whatever people think it's grim and dark for them, and
Okay.
That's fine.
Some pretty hard line answers so far. I like it.
Yeah. All right, Steve, you were prepared, so
Yeah, well, I think I have some really unpopular opinions about what is and isn't grimdark, or what is a good
should I
place to
leave
start, but
now?
we'll get into that later. Yeah. So I have a couple of things written down. So first, I think one of the things is one of the major things about grimdark that I like is that there's consequences. So when somebody dies, they're dead. There's usually no magical thing that brings them back. Um, when someone makes a bad decision, they pay for it, or someone else pays for it that they didn't intend to pay for. So there's always some kind of, whenever someone makes a mistake, there's a consequence for that mistake. So the decisions that are made have more weight to me, because if it doesn't work out, then someone will pay for it. And I know some people hate this term, but morally gray characters, I think they seem more like people than the typical hero, villain. Everyone's kind of just trying to survive. So the lines are blurred with who's right and who's wrong. You can also find yourself conflicted on who the villain may be, and or who the hero is. The heroes do awful things because they might have to survive or to get to their goal. Another one is typically, I think, for me anyway, I think lower fantasy is kind of go hand in hand with grimdark. I think if you have kind of the high fantasy, it kind of takes away that element of the kind of grittiness that I like to see. But I think one of the things that kind of brings me back to the genre is that we've seen someone overcome the odds and seen someone pick themselves up and achieve their goals, or to survive when everything is stacked against them. I think it's nice to see someone overcome and to succeed, or to at least somewhat achieve their goals, even when everything looks very dark, and they find a way to persevere. I think that's something that's a little bit, it can be like hopeful in a way. And I don't think grimdark has to be hopeless, and I don't think it has to be nihilistic. I don't think grimdark has to be nihilistic. I think some people, and again, there's no right or wrong answer, just for me. But I think so. If something's not nihilistic, I don't necessarily think it's not grimdark, at least for me. But nuts and bolts, that's where I'm coming from.
All right. That is an amazing answer.
I'll go
I'm
next.
glad I went first.
I think I agree to a large extent with what Steve said about its low fantasy. I think because I think Grimdark is a bit of sort of twist on the traditional fantasy genre, which was very much good versus evil and good prevails and this hopeful thing. So I agree on the low fantasy. I agree on the morally grey characters. There's never a clear character to root for because there's neither good nor bad. And maybe someone you root for then does something really nasty and horrible. And I think that, so there's that. But I think I disagree with you, Steve. I think Grimdark has to be nihilistic. It is a no hope or little hope sort of genre, because if we remove that nihilism away, I think you could call many books grimdark, which are not. Just because horrible things happen to characters and there are consequences, that's not enough, because then you could argue that Realm of the Underlings is grimdark because it doesn't shy away from depicting some really horrible and brutal stuff that happens to characters. And I think everyone will balk at the idea that Robin Hood is a grimdark author. So I think there is that kind of, if not nihilistic, cynical. And I think for me, the epitome, well, I haven't read a lot of Grimdark, but I think if you want to get a flavor for it, Abercrombie, First Law trilogy is the one. I'm sure we'll unpick that later. And quite possibly Holly Tinsley's Vanguard Chronicles is looking pretty grim and dark after the first book.
I need to look into that because I didn't know. All right, then I'm lost. great position to be in. I agree with parts of what everyone said because, like Steve said, there is no right or wrong answer. It's a combination of all those factors, and for me, it's the basics of what is it? Setting, circumstance, and subject. Like Jose said about nihilism or cynicism. That is one of the settings that is needed for me to find it grim for characters to be in, or just downright awful. And then the subject could be dark, like gore or rape or everything that is so bad that a person really changes in a bad way because of it, or struggles to deal with it in a bad way. And I love this subgenre. For me, it's a subgenre the most because it puts people or characters in the most horrendous circumstances, and you watch it play out psychologically. What happens to them? Their choices become more extreme the more extreme the circumstances are, which is very interesting to read about. Like, what would you do in that circumstance? It brings out more of a feeling, positive or negative, for me, that makes it more enjoyable to read and more exciting to read, because I'm more attracted to how deep a character goes, the core of him. Will he break under these circumstances, or does he triumph, like Steve said? Like, can he evolve? Can he get out of this? And yeah, everything Grimdark just screams at me like, you haven't seen anything yet, because every new series I read in that subgenre, it's like, oh my god, I didn't think of this. It's so wild how extreme or the other way it goes sometimes. Of course, Abercrombie's work is the one that everybody says, oh, you need to read this if you want to get in Grimdark. I love his work, but I disagree if you want to just see what it's all about. I would say, I think they were mentioned, of course, they were mentioned. The Prince of Nothing and the Manifest Delusions are the two I'm going to go with to say to people, like, you want a taste of Grimdark and see that it's for you. It's not gonna be like, oh, if you don't like these books, then it's not for you. They're just so extreme on some level that they find that line and just wave at it as it passes by, like, okay, this is too much for some people, which makes it the most Grimdark for me.
I hear the term dark fantasy a lot, and I wonder what everyone thinks is dark fantasy grimdark. Is it the same thing for everyone? Because what's the difference?
To go with the dark stuff. So grim is the circumstances, but dark is horror, more like I don't know, gore. Seriously, why can't I think of anything horror? There we go. That's for me.
I would agree with Jozua there. I think just dark just means vampires, werewolves, that sort of
exactly.
more gothic setting. For any D&D players out there, we're talking Ravenloft as opposed to Forgotten Realms.
Yes.
Hmm.
I can see there are some non-D&D players in the room.
There's a couple, yeah. There's a couple. Holly's been known to play D&D from time to time.
Just occasionally, yeah. Not doesn't mean I know anything about it, but I do play.
The Joshua touched on first law. I don't think first law is. I think it's a gateway drug into the subgenre. I think it's a way to kind of dip your toes in. But I don't think it's a good representation of what is really. How can I say this? I think it's a good way to kind of dip your toes. I don't think it's a good. For me, it doesn't represent what the subgenre embodies. Like it gets a taste of it. It's more, which is good. It's more accessible. It's like a, for me, when I kind of saw it as like a Tarantino version of fantasy, because the characters all have like these personality, like these quirky person. It's funny. It's
you can
it's
say
easy
the
to get
same
into.
about Manifest Delusions. Those characters are sometimes funny, really funny, but it's much harder. The world, the setting, everything is amped to up to 11, and like you say, dip your toes in more. Like First Law is like Coke Light. So it's a light grimdark fantasy, I think. What?
No, yeah.
No. I saw Jose going like, no.
No. I was saying, I was just musing on the light, dark sort of,
oh, sorry.
No. So there's dark grimdark and light grimdark.
Oh.
There's
Yes.
shades.
there's shades of Grimdark. Well, I've never read Manifest Illusion, so I can't compare, sadly. For me, like I said, I started with Warhammer, and so I started with the idea that Grimdark was this scenario or this type of world that never evolves. It's just fighting. Nothing ever gets resolved. It's all pointless. And then when I read for the First Law, which is completely different, it's not the world so much. It's not about the fighting. That's what I mean. It's more the psychology behind it, the mindset of the characters and how they interact in this world where there's no escape. There's always something bigger than themselves working in the background. All they can achieve is this, looks like a victory, but it's kind of not. It's that feeling of hopelessness. It's not so much about the gore or how many battles or torture scenes. It's about that sense of hopelessness and, like Jose said, the cynicism of usually the main characters as they live, try to survive in that world.
Yeah.
So it's
I think,
much more
I don't know. I
psychological.
think we have used the word hopeless, but I'm not entirely sure. And again, I'm just referring to First Law. But the characters aren't necessarily hopeless. I think they're just
Hopelessness.
what's the word? I think they're more like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. They accept the world for what it is, so they don't have a hope to make it better. Or all they aspire to do is to make the most for themselves. They're not trying to change the world for the better. They're just trying to advance.
You as a reader can feel that hopelessness. I found the word perfectly for the Prince of Nothing series. If you want to feel hopeless and feel like everything is bad, read that series. Even though, like you said, Jose, it's like, the characters make the best of it for themselves. You as a reader are reading it and feeling like, I don't understand how they live in this place. I don't understand how they survive.
So when we talk about hopelessness, is what we perceive as the reader, not what the characters live and how they approach the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Holly, how did you find out that you were writing Grimdark?
So I think I kind of had a similar experience to a lot of the other grimdark authors that I've spoken to since, in that the funny thing is, going back to what Steve was saying about the difference between dark fantasy and grimdark, is it's generally not the writers that put these subgenre labels on. Certainly not at first, maybe more so now it's become a more marketable term. But certainly when I kind of first started writing, it was the readers that were defining it rather than me deliberately trying to write something grimdark. So I think that's why people struggle to find an answer to what it actually is, because it's translated and interpreted by the person reading the story. So all these kind of conversations and arguments about nihilism and hope really stem from the fact that that is going to be different for everybody based on their perspective. So, I've read grimdark books where people said, "Oh God, there's no hope in this, and it's just nihilism, and it's just pure depression and misery and grimness." And you'll go to the next review for that book, and someone will say, "There was so much hope in this," and I really felt, uplifted seeing these characters survive and triumph against these terrible traumas in the face of hopelessness. So a lot of it really comes down to what your interpretation of those things are rather than the writer's interpretation.
And speaking of marketing, I do wonder now, I think maybe 5 years ago, I think grimdark was a more marketable term. I think maybe some people would use that. Like some people may have used it, but I don't know that it's, I kind of see that cozy fantasy is kind of making a comeback, and it's not for me, but I do think that the cozier stuff is maybe appealing more to some people. And I don't know that it's, like you said, I don't know if people set out to write. It just kind of happens that way. But I'm sure some people use it as a marketable term, but I'm not sure that it's as marketable as it was, I don't know, 5 years ago or 3-4 years ago.
So I actually do have a bit of an opinion on that, and I'm glad that you brought it up because I wanted to mention it earlier. Because one of the things that Susana said at the start of this was about grimdark being everywhere, which I think is absolutely true. You just, every other book that comes out, certainly in the past kind of maybe 5 years, has been probably a grimdark book. But I think part of that stems from the fact that there was really no marketing term for these types of books before that. Aside from to call them fantasy or dark fantasy. And I think what happened is there was already so many books in existence that fit suddenly within this subgenre of grimdark. So prime example at the moment, I have my beautiful book here, which I know other people won't see, but I'm going to show you anyway because it's so beautiful. So that's Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, which I would arguably say is a grimdark book. But obviously when it was released, it would never have had that kind of tag to it because it didn't exist. So I think when it suddenly came about, it wasn't just a case of new authors or new books being called grimdark. All of a sudden there was just masses of pre-existing books that suddenly started falling within this new subgenre. So I think that kind of almost felt like it was a mass influx into the market. It was probably propelled a little bit by that.
Sure, but it's easier to find those books now that interest me because of that term. Like Les Mis, I haven't read it. I know the story, and I'm like, depending on how gory or whatever it gets, it could be a grimdark novel then for me, and then that would make it more interesting for me to read.
So I was saying.
Yeah,
I was saying
that was a
then
great
that
example.
Orwell's 1984 and Huxley's Brave New World are grimdark now.
Oh,
I could see it.
1984 for sure, right?
great question.
That, yeah, tough one.
Do you need fantasy elements to be grimdark?
No. So now we're talking about grimdark fantasy, I think, like the first Law Malazan, Song of Ice and Fire. But then
I'm going to hold Steve ransom to his earlier point when he said it's low fantasy. So we don't need the fantasy. I don't know. I'm just being facetious here.
Okay.
That's why Lemise could have been a grimdark novel. That isn't fantasy.
I buy that.
Interesting.
Could,
So
could,
grimdark
could you
could
imagine
even
like a grimdark biography or something? I mean,
aren't all biographies grimdark?
do they kill
Is
a lot of
history
people?
grimdark?
History is grimdark.
Can certainly
No.
History is
some
grim dark.
characters are pretty grim and dark, isn't it? Certain German dictators and stuff like that. For
Yeah,
sure.
we had the Dark Ages, and those times were grim. I mean,
Yeah.
The Crusades?
Yeah, but just because something is grim and dark,
It doesn't make a grim dark,
necessarily
Susana.
make
Explain that.
grim dark. So,
That's exactly what it is, right?
I'm still trying to get around 1984 as grimdark. I don't think it fits, but I see your point. But I'm like, no, it doesn't fit. But why doesn't it fit?
It definitely
can't come
has
up
to
with an
do
answer.
with the marketing value of the word itself. It helps a lot. Like YA is marketing to an audience. I mean, if you see YA, that's gonna be for me because YA. I love YA. I love grimdark.
Can YA be grimdark?
Yes.
That is another tough one because the first time someone mentioned the Ashen Sand series to me, I was like, so it's YA because it's a coming of age story, and when I read it, it
Ashen
was
Sand,
definitely not
It's
YA.
not YA. But the
And-
first page, it's not YA.
Yeah, and that made me
Yeah.
happy. That made me happy. Like it's not YA because I don't like YA, but if it could, I don't know what the lines are there that it should be grimdark YA. What is the worst thing that could happen in something like that? I don't know.
It could happen off the page or off screen, I guess you could say. I mean, it could be
Insinuating.
alluded to that
Okay.
certain things happen
Yeah.
and not, get into. But I think YA could be grimdark.
There's something morally wrong about YA being grimdark.
Okay.
You know, it's like having. It's like PG-rated horror movies. I don't know. There's something oxymoronic about the whole thing.
Then they shouldn't be reading history books, like you said. I mean, what happened in the camps and stuff. Most of those history books have pictures in them. I mean, that is brutal, and it really happened.
It's interesting.
Okay, so I feel like sorry, I just talked over someone.
No, go ahead.
Okay, just because this is something I'm going to get really passionate about now,
Oh, okay.
and it's also going to give you a glimpse into potentially, what I was like as a child and why I've turned out the way I have. But my favourite book when I was a child, so this is probably around 12, 13, I would say, is a book called The Alchemist's Cat by Robin Jarvis. And again, I would argue that this is a children's grimdark book. It's a brilliant book. I've still got a copy now, but it literally starts with the protagonist's entire family dying of smallpox. So this is how it starts. The protagonist then moves to London to meet their new guardian, who is almost immediately murdered by thugs and ruffians. And this story has got so much death and so much misery within its pages. It's set against the backdrop of London during the bubonic plague. No one is safe. There are characters that get killed. And this is something that I read, obviously, as quite a young teenager. And it was amazing to have a book for me at that age that spoke with that level of truth and that level of authenticity about the world. And, I'm not saying that this is something that every child wants in their life, but I would assume that there's probably other children who are like me that really at that age had a real need for a book that spoke truth to them and didn't cushion the sharper edges of the world. So I totally appreciate that, you may not want to give this book to your kids. I totally understand that, but I just wanted to say how much it meant to me, and just, yeah, that's my little hill
No,
that
no, no.
I'll stand on.
I think you're correct about that. That a lot of kids need that non-cushioning part, and we're safe because most kids don't like to read. So I think it's pretty fine. Has anybody read Watership Down? I mean, if you want grimdark, but then with animals, it is. It's pretty
No,
brutal
I've heard
with guts
about
and
it
everything.
now.
I mean,
I'm still traumatized by that. I can't talk about that at all.
I watched the movie as a kid, not quite knowing what it was, and the movie as a kid, I was moderately traumatized by how it ended, and then I read the book as an adult, and then I made a connection with the movie, and yeah, there's something there.
It's I'm here thinking it's interesting what the things that you read as a child, then how it relates to what you find grim and dark as an adult. My favorite book as a child was the Steadfast Tin Soldier, one of Grimm's fairy tales, and it's very dark. But again, it's I wouldn't recommend it to kids at all. And later on, in my teens, was Wuthering Heights, which I wouldn't consider grim dark, but it still has that very dark atmosphere, that sense of hopelessness, the characters completely unlikable. That is the sort of thing that I find
but great
grim dark
example. The Brothers
to some
Grimm,
degree.
great
Yeah.
example.
That sort of psychology. Yeah, those were fairy tales, like proper fairy tales.
Now I have to add those books to my reading list.
But it is interesting what you said about what is dark or grimdark for you because of what you got to read or see as a child. Because a lot of people get desensitized to a lot of stuff, maybe at an early age, and then what is horror for you is like, oh, he touches his eye, ooh, and the other one is like, doesn't he take a spoon and go like, boop? I mean, that's yeah, where you grow up. I mean, that is very interesting.
Yeah, an ice cream scoop.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, but aren't a lot of at least even like the older Disney movies? I mean, like Bambi. That's not. I mean,
And it happens off screen, like you said that it goes off screen. YA grimdark, it could happen.
Dumbo,
I'm
when
just
he gets
saying.
drunk, the nightmare scene in Dumbo when he gets drunk creeped me out as a child, big time.
Yeah.
Very trippy, very trippy.
Pinocchio. I think it's pretty dark.
I think
The
it's coming back to that thing that Susanna said though as well about it's because all those films are based on much more watered down versions of original fairy tales, and when you look at the original fairy tales, I mean they are dark, and then you've got things as well like the one that I thought of just now is the little match girl. I mean that's dark.
Those fairy tales, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were written with a clear moralizing intention. It was like a clear warning to kids, isn't it? So they weren't written for the pleasure of writing something that ran counter to tradition, or wanting to turn a genre on its head, or subvert expectations or anything like that. They had a very clear aim. Whereas I think now, maybe, and like I said, I haven't read much Grimdark, maybe some authors are just writing for shock value, are they? Is that a thing?
yeah.
Absolutely.
I think some do. I think like something like splatterpunk is the intention is to shock, is to appall, is to really to be as extreme as possible. It's not so much about the story; it's about the violence and gore and the just. It's like an extreme horror movie that sets out to to just be disturbing, to be offensive, I guess, for some people. But I think there could be elements of that, but I don't know that Grimdark as a whole is that's the intention is to shock. I don't know. I mean, there are books out there that maybe there's some people who do that. Like not that never happens, but I don't know that that's because splatterpunk is to shock you, is to disgust you. I'm not sure that Grimdark is. I think Grimdark more sets out to. If it sets out to just, it's more of a like we discussed, or like more like a psychological or emotional type of to appeal to you in that way as a sad or to kill off a character that you care about, or to see someone suffer, or a character you come to attach yourself to. So I guess there's elements, but I think something like splatterpunk that's the intention that's the whole genre, is to be as disturbing as possible.
But it's true, Jose. There are some that. So I love Manifest Delusions of Michael R. Fletcher. It's amazing. I think everybody should have tried it if you want to try Grimdark. But he has another series like The Obsidian Path, with the first book, Blackstone Heart. And when I just read it, and I think this one was before the other books, and it felt like he was really trying to go for shock value instead of go for a story like in the Manifest Delusions, like how far can I take this, and there's another one that I felt that way with Empires of Dust. The first book was more for shock value, in my opinion, than the second book, and the third book starts. It starts to have a cohesive story and more character development. The first book is like she's going all over the place just to show you stuff, and it felt wrong. So I think there are definitely some writers that go for that. I'm just gonna write Grimdark for Grimdark because it's fashionable.
The last book in the Empires of Dust series, that still
I'm halfway.
gets me. There is, I won't spoil, but there's some things that was like it really got to me.
All right. See.
Yeah. So if it got to me, it's like, wow.
Hardcore Steve.
It's like that was like, yeah. And Sarah Chorn writes some like Seraphina's Lament. Like there's a death in that book that really got to me too. But that's speaks to the crafting the story and the characters in a way that makes you care about them, and when they get killed in a horrible way, it's it has an emotional reaction.
I didn't have that in the first book, as in it didn't feel like that at all. The first book was a mishmash of things she was trying to be as dark as possible. That's what it felt like.
Interesting.
Well, I guess the same way that you can have a romance plot in any other genre, pretty much, you can have a grimdark elements in even in high fantasy or YA. It doesn't mean that the whole book is grimdark just because it has grimdark elements.
Yeah.
So, what's the? I guess I know the answer, but just putting it out there to have the conversation. What's the appeal of reading Grimdark? Like, what makes you, Steve, enjoy it more than possibly any other genre within fantasy?
Seeing the characters overcome and persevere, even if they don't survive. even if their legacy is changes some, even in a small way, even if it's not changing the world, they may not save the world, they may not save a group of people, even if they save one person, or even if they just tip the scales just a little bit, they like do their little part. I think just seeing them overcome, and even if it's a small difference, because I think that's kind of what we not very many of us can really change the world, right? If we set out to, we can change one person, the path of one person, or the like nudge things over just a little bit. I think it's kind of, I don't know. I think it's like, I think for me, it's I don't want to say encouraging, but that is that element of hope that you can make a difference, even in a small way, even against the worst situation, you can find a way to overcome.
You're such a positive Grimdark reader. It's weird. No, I understand you completely.
I just like it because, yeah, but usually there's more interesting characters. I don't know. I think I can relate to characters a lot better. One of the things I don't read a lot of high fantasy anymore because I find very hard to relate to the characters. They are all so morally driven, so righteous, or just so evil for the sake of being evil. I can't. I really like characters that are utterly flawed. Characters that you probably shouldn't like. I'm always kind of rooting for the villain sometimes, just because they're more interesting, and that is an aspect that I like about Grimdark, is that everyone is kind of a villain.
Yeah, could be kind of a villain.
That's just
Yeah, it's the like Steve said, but then for me, it's all over the place. Could be evil, could be good. It's just their reactions in those circumstances, their decision making, their thought process, everything about that character that makes it function and tick in that world. That is interesting, or more interesting than any other genre for me. Kosei or Holly?
What about you? Yeah. What about you, Holly?
I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it, because I know what I get out of Grimdark, and I think it's to do with the way I look at difficult or dark or scary subjects. So if there's something that is a horrible thing or a scary thing, I like to be able to take it out of whatever the situation is, put it down in front of me, and look at it in a very factual, logical way. That's how I overcome my own fears in my own life. And I think Grimdark somehow does that for me via books, because what it does is it looks at the what and the how and the why. So we know this character is a villain. We know this character has, just murdered 500 townsfolk. What I'm interested in is the how did they get to that place in their life? What has driven them to be in this situation? Why is their perception of the world different to mine? So I feel like Grimdark can be quite analytical in that sense. And again, it goes back to the whole idea of it being psychologically based, is it almost takes the magic out of it. And by that, I don't mean the physical magic in the book. It makes it more real. And that's the best I can explain it. It's a really hard thing to put into words.
But you did it.
Yeah. Jose, you can answer your own question.
Your own question.
Jesus. I think for me is like it's like watching movies. Sometimes you're in the mood for a thriller, sometimes you're in the mood for a comedy, sometimes you're in the mood for a horror. And to me, Grimdark is the horror of fantasy. So it's not my default. Every now and then, I like to watch a horror movie. I like to read a more grimdark book, but it's not my main thing. I prefer slightly more traditional, classic fantasy. That's how I say it. It's like choosing from a menu.
Do you are so? I'm curious. So, classic fantasy. What has your faith in classic fantasy been shaken by your recent adventures into certain series? No.
No, not at all. Not at all. But suppose my experience with classic fantasy, we were talking before about what you read as a child, and for me, Dungeons and Dragons and classic epic high fantasy has such a huge impact on me as a teenager that it was my life for many years, and it's what made me find a group of people that I could fit in and be comfortable with. So no, I still think Lord of the Rings is the best book ever written. I still, I have reread Dragonlance 5 times. I still read Forgotten Realms. It's it had that
We should
impact.
talk about that. We should talk about that because
What, with a therapist or here? Well,
I have a huge Forgotten Realms collection and Dragonlance. We should talk about that with a therapist. You and me in a room.
Fair enough. I'm down for that anytime.
It's if you do that, then there's something wrong with you. It's true.
Yeah, I'm surprised your Wheel of Time experience didn't shake your faith.
We don't have to go there, Steve.
Oh, dear.
We don't
Shots
have to
being
We always have
fired.
to go there. We always have to go there. I love hearing you rant about it. It's just so much fun.
But Wheel of Time is not fantasy.
Yeah.
The last book gets
Where?
pretty grimdark.
Are you telling me
places.
Wheel
I don't know if
Wheel
you
of
got
Time
there.
is
The Wheel of Time.
The last book. The last book. I don't know. I remember getting to a point where I just had to put it down because every time I was reading it at the festival, kind of between gigs, and every time I would go to the tent to read another chapter, someone died horribly. I do remember that clearly. And I went and watched another gig, came back. Okay, this person died again. Okay, all my
you
favorite
could
characters
do
are
it
dying.
like
I'm
Joey
done
and
with
just
this.
put it in the fridge like he does with Little Women.
It's a pretty
Someone died, put it in the fridge
kind of,
or the freezer.
no. I wouldn't call it grimdark. I'm joking, but it gets pretty dark. That's just what I'm saying. Of course,
I think
Jose
he
is
went
not even there
to
anymore.
go punch something.
Yeah.
Remembering his
You punched a hole in the wall, probably.
Yeah.
We didn't say anything bad about you. No worries.
I believe you.
Oh, okay. But
It's yeah.
But that's okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Let's reverse that question onto you guys. So, has your reading of Grimdark spoiled, in inverted commas, your appreciation for more traditional books? Severe head nodding from Steve. Wow. Go on.
not even close. Lord of the Rings is still amazing. I read what is the relaxing fantasy book again? The coffee shop one. What is it?
Oh, Legends and Lattes.
Legends of
Lattes.
It was a fine book. I mean, I liked it. It makes other books maybe less thrilling, but it doesn't detract from if it's good. It's a good book. It's written badly, whatever. It doesn't detract at all for me. But for Steve, apparently,
Steve?
I can't go back to traditional fantasy now that I've been reading so many. But
You've gone vegan.
I should. Yeah, I've gone carnivore, I think.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, but I can from time to time if it's the right book I can. But generally speaking, when I go back to more classic traditional fantasy, I just think it's kind of boring. Like it's kind of like watching a Marvel movie, and there's some comfort in knowing what's going to happen. The hero is going to prevail. the day will be saved, everyone will be happy, and that's fine sometimes. Like I get, it's nice to have that. It's nice to go in and not have to go into dark places or to have a character you care about die and not come back. But it's just boring. Like you can kind of slap a certain beats that you can kind of what's coming next, like, or at least a variation of it. And there's certain things that happen, and you just kind of can tell where things are going to go. And sometimes that's okay. Like sometimes that's fun. Like
you
it's
don't
like
see the
coming
point
back to your
anymore.
favorite meal. You know.
Yeah, you don't see the point anymore. I've got that with video games. If people say to me, "Oh man, this game, this story is amazing," let's say God of War or The Last of Us, I would slap someone seriously in the face with that game if I have to, because no, it's point A to point B, and everything in between is character build. It's boring from point A to point B, and it's pretty to look at. I give them that. And I think that's because of Grimdark.
I think it made me. I think it made me a bit more picky. Yes, I still enjoy, Lord of the Rings and more light or just dark fantasy. It doesn't need to be, but I really prefer a book that is character driven, and for that it needs to have good characters. And like I said, for me, good characters have to be morally grey and flawed and a bit selfish and cynical, and that's usually found in grimdark novels. So
Jose
Wow.
does not agree.
You don't believe yourself,
Not necessarily.
Susana. You do not even believe yourself.
Who are you? What happened?
Because
What have you done to Susanna?
because Discworld.
But I say, but I don't always call it grimdark. You see, I just yeah, but this scroll doesn't feature in my top
That's why
5,
you're wrong.
for example.
Okay, that explains it all.
It's no, I read a lot, and like my tastes are wide, and recently with all these discussions, I've been reading stuff that I would never, never, wouldn't even think about it. But I always come back when I go for a comforting read, like for example, when I'm feeling down. A couple months back, I went and reread Best Served Cold because it makes me feel good. So what does that say? I don't know. I find it very cathartic.
Isn't
Another
that the
one for the
worst
therapist.
Abercrombie book?
The what? The worst?
If I'm honest, of all the books, I read the entire thing. That is the one I was like, point A to point B. That was the most boring book he wrote in the entire series. And that's why it's getting adapted to movie or series.
Ouch!
What is it?
Ouch! No, because it's the best.
It was the most basic
best.
one that they were like, oh, this is
Of-
easy
of-
to copy paste.
Even Susana can be right every now and then. Exactly.
Yeah, just like a broken clock.
Right. And you, Holly, did reading Grimdark change your tastes? Or were you always on the grim and dark?
I mean, I think we established earlier on that I started reading Grimdark when I was 12, so I can't really compare. I've never been a fan of epic or high fantasy. It's just not my genre. At the risk of being kicked out of this stream, I've
Goodbye.
never read The Lord of the Rings. I will admit it.
I haven't either.
I understand the appeal of it to other people. I understand the success of it, but I always enjoyed more low fantasy, so I always lean more towards the historical fantasy. So people like Stephen Pressfield, Bernard Cornwell. I know that's a little bit ambiguous when you look at history, but stuff like that I think always appealed to my kind of desire for more realism. So yeah, not a high fantasy person, I'm
Says the
afraid.
dungeon master.
I mean, yes, there is that, but I think that's, to be fair, D&D came later in life, so yeah, that's my fantasy outlet is through Dungeons and Dragons.
But having said that about you like the history aspect, have you read Prince of Nothing?
I haven't actually. It's one of the ones on the list that I haven't read.
It is difficult for a lot of people because he's the way he writes, it can be all over the place. So it's either you love it or you really hate it. But it is more in line with what you like about books because it feels like an alternative version of the Crusades.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like it would be up my street, definitely.
Susana was not a fan.
Yeah,
I understand.
no, I want to know the story. I'm gonna have to wait for the adaptation because the prose doesn't work for me at all. I've tried again in the meantime, and even the audiobook, I lose track of what's being said because it just goes all over the place so much. I can't focus.
Understandable.
Sorry,
I didn't write it. It's okay.
it really doesn't work.
No reason to
We
apologize.
forgive you.
Yeah.
I'll wait for the movie.
Yeah.
No,
No, I just want to say, Holly, you're not alone at the risk of being kicked off too. I haven't read Lord of the Rings either, so it's two of us.
Go
ahead.
I was going to say something really stupid.
We're talking about Lord of the Rings. That was not what I was talking about.
Has everybody read A Song of Ice and Fire in this group? Okay,
Yes.
so what is
More
your
than
stance
once.
on being grimdark or not? Because that is interesting. I thought so.
Wow, I'm surprised.
Yeah,
Where's
yeah.
Paramita when we need her? Yeah.
Yeah, so three people are going like, nope, this is definitely not grimdark. Why?
Really?
And any of the three?
No, it's very grim and
Okay.
very dark,
Wow.
but it's not grim dark.
This is where Joe Abercrombie changed my mind. So I think for me, A Song of Ice and Fire was sort of the more, if you want, more mature, slightly darker series the first series like that I read. And I think for someone that came from a very traditional background, that moment when Ned Stark gets his head chopped off to the very last line before the guillotine falls or the axe falls and they chop off his head, I'm waiting for him to get rescued, to somehow get out of it, because this doesn't happen in fantasy. Your main protagonist doesn't die in the first book. And I think, it was a sword. And when the sword fell off, I was like, fuck, like, this is a game changer. And yeah, I think on first impressions, you could think that the characters are morally grey, but they're not. I think they all have a code, and I think you can understand their motivations. And I think still there are good and bad, like traditional goodies and baddies. Like Jaime Lannister.
There's a difference. Sorry, there's a difference between being, what we call a morally grey character and just being human or just a well-rounded character. No one's perfect. It creates very believable characters because they are all imperfect. They have their ideals, their codes, but they are all deep down very human. You can relate to them, even if you don't agree. You can relate to them. That's
I do relate. I drink and I know
it doesn't
things. I do relate.
And I think, though, even though we're never going to see the end of the series, the good guys will still win. They will defeat the White Walkers, they will overthrow Queen Cersei, and you will still have some sort of catharsis at the end, where the good guys win. Yeah, there'll be casualties along the way, but we talked in the past in other conversations.
Yeah, his camera isn't focused.
No, my camera's out of
All
focus.
right.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No. I said we've talked in other conversations that Jaime Lannister goes in this redemption arc, and I think that some of the goodies and starting the wrong side, but the eventual. I think, if you stop to think about it, A Song of Ice and Fire is not Grimdark.
All right, and Holly's the last person there.
I'm in a good position now because Jose just set me up really nicely now for this answer. So I think the point you made there about winning is really important because I think, as was said, it's not a grim dark, it's a book that is grim and dark. And I think what made it lack that grim dark element is that when you look at the losers and the winners in Song of Ice and Fire I'm trying to think how I can explain this for an audio podcast. You've got the winners here and the losers here. There is a much larger gap between where the losers end up and where the winners end up. There is higher stakes, for want of a better word, whereas I think with most grimdarks, you find that gap between your losers and your winners is very small indeed. And I think that, for me, is the main difference.
Right. I'm shocked, honestly. I'm so surprised. You guys don't think... the character deaths, and I guess the question is, does the end need to... So if we assume that the good guys, the good side will win, does that make it not grimdark? Do you need because of all the character deaths and all the things that happen, doesn't that embody all we've been talking about?
Because
I don't know.
I think
no, that's just history. That's just life.
They got morally high ambitions. Jon Snow is an idealist. Tyrion still wants the best for the people, and he does try to change the world in the ways that he can. There are some clearly evil people, like from the Iron. Is it the Iron Islands? Is that I've read it many years ago, but I think there are still some, good and you can see also in Mother of Dragons, whatever her name was, I forget now, that her ambitions to be queen are sort of justified, that she's been robbed of her birthright, and I think it is not as cynical and it's not as nihilistic as the slap in the face that is Bayaz in the First Lord.
First of all, the White Walkers losing is a bad ending. I mean, come on. Nobody agrees. Excellent. But I understand the whole not being a grimdark, because the overall world. So there are situations and places that are grim and it's hard to live in, and especially in high society, it's dog eat dog. But there are parts that it's like they're just farmers on a farm, and the world is just normal. Like in history books, normal people are having their daily lives. There aren't any stakes for them, because it's just hope that no noble passes your street and claims everything you own, and that's it. So the circumstances aren't that grim unless you focus on those parts, like everything beyond the wall is very bad for you. Yeah, those are grim circumstances. That's true.
No, you were talking earlier how history is quite grim dark, and history has dark periods. You were talking about Crusades and the Holocaust and all that. Yeah, horrible dark periods, but they passed. That's the thing. The world keeps changing. There are good times, bad times, wars, peace. It's always changing. To be a proper grim dark environment, nothing really changes. You're always stuck in that world.
Is backed in a
Always
corner,
at war,
trying to defend himself,
always
going
fighting to achieve something.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. No, I can see where thinking back on A Song of Ice and Fire, there are characters who are, I don't know if you would say morally. I think the lines are pretty defined on motivations and kind of the good versus evil almost. And then you have the White Walkers who, but I think it'd be great if the White Walkers won and we just kind of start over again and kind of
reset everything.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Well, I
That
guess
would be
we'll never
Grimdark.
find out, will we?
Mr. Martin,
I don't
if
know.
you are listening, please do this.
Like a little digression. Steve, you never read the books.
I
You
got to
never
4.
went all the way to Dance Dragons. Yeah, especially in Dance and Dragons, the last one, you get to see a lot more of Essos, of what's going on outside Westeros, and I find that world a lot more grimdark than Westeros. Their society with slavery, with the horrible fights in the arena, life has no value in that world, pretty much, or it's very low value. I find that it's if while in Westeros, yes, it's the battle against the White Walkers, which are this absolute evil, death itself almost. In the East, they're fighting against life. No one is actually living; they're just surviving. It's such a system, and it's so ingrained in their culture, even in the different cities, that's why when Daenerys is going around trying to liberate the slaves, the moment she leaves, everything reverts to how it was before. It's very hard to change. So I find that part is a lot more grimdark than the actual
there are
kingdoms,
grimdark parts,
which are just bickering against each other.
It's just like I said before, the parts of the world are like fine, and other parts grimdark. The other one you put in there, Malazan.
Well, don't tell Erickson that. Because
I know
he is not a fan of
but it's the same thing as Martin's work. Parts are really like dark and grim setting and everything, so the grim dark can apply on situations, but then there are parts that aren't as bad.
I think like Deadhouse Gates is pretty dark.
You have to check. I think Susana hasn't read.
No, I don't. It's spoiler free.
I only read the first one.
No spoilers. Just, but I think the second book is pretty dark.
Yeah, definitely. But again, going back to that, spoilers.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah. But yeah, people have very strong opinions on that one, on that series.
On every book in that series.
Yeah.
I really dislike
me too.
Gardens of the Moon. I don't know, not because it was dark. I just thought
it was a hodgepodge.
I thought it was stupid. Sorry, I have to try again.
It really just drops you in the middle of everything. It's like almost like you start a movie in the middle of the movie instead of starting at the beginning, and it kind of it's a thing. It's a lot. It can be a lot. Yeah. There's like 80 characters, I think, in book 2, something like that. From the character list has like 80 characters in it.
I stopped counting. Every time I go to that page, you have all the characters in the beginning of the book. I'm like, no, I'm just going to read the book and see what happens. I don't know, Holly or Jose, have you read anything Malazan
I remain blissfully and completely ignorant of Malazan, and that may be a project for 2025. But at the moment, I'm enjoying Millennium's Rule, which is a more traditional almost YA fantasy, and it's very cozy, and I love it very much. So we'll get there eventually.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
A lot of
I
people.
haven't read Lord of the Rings, so you're fine. Yeah.
I think there's a certain amount of peer pressure in the community to read certain series, and if you don't, you're not qualified. Like you're not good enough. I don't know. And I think Malasang is definitely the one where if you read it, you're in. If you haven't read it, you're out.
Do you know, I think I'm just going to completely throw myself at the mercy of, the readership now. And I'm going to say, pretty much guarantee any major series that someone says you have to read, I haven't read. So I haven't read Lord of the Rings. I haven't read any of the Malazan. I think the problem is that all these books tend to be like the really chunky, huge books, and I can't do that. So my sweet spot for books is around 300 to 350 pages. So anything beyond that, I already know that I'm going to really struggle with.
Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance, read it. 300 pages, sorry, yeah.
But you're right, Holly, because all the books we've been mentioning that I haven't read, all these series you've been talking, Prince of Nothing, whatever, the Empire of Sun, whatever, I've been checking them on Amazon as we were talking, and it's like, fuck, another trilogy, what, another 600 pages? It's like, no, please, like, no. Why does fantasy need to be paid by the page, seemingly?
Ask
Robin
Hobb.
Because of all the world building.
Yeah, it's a lot. And it's like, no, it's sort of Putin every time, if you want to get a taste for something, you have to embark on a 1,500-page minimum read. And for those of us who actually have jobs and families and other things to do in our lives, it'll take me almost a month to read something like, I've got there, what was it? The Dragonbone Chair, 800 pages. It's just, I really need to wait almost for a period of holidays to get started, because otherwise it'll take forever to read.
And what's wrong with that? Like I've been reading The Quiet Gods for almost 2 weeks now, and it's still at 70%. I am a slow reader, but I'm reading like a couple of hours a day because I'm loving it so much. And it's great to go in this journey.
2 hours a day! Susana, I get 20 minutes a day.
What's wrong? Okay, well, that's fine. Well, I don't sleep much, so there's that.
No, you see, it's
no.
Hey, exactly.
The perks of not having kids.
I'm going to say something probably unpopular, maybe not with this group, but I'm going to say something pretty unpopular. But I think a lot of the people who say you have to read certain things to be qualified to speak on other books or to have a perspective that matters. I think a lot of the so-called influencers or the book, whatever, the authority, I think a lot of those people don't actually read those stories. I don't think they spend the time to really read them. And I think a lot of them are full of shit. And I don't think it actually happens.
Agreed.
And I think
Amen.
they just claim that they say that they do because that's what's expected. And they've read it, so they know what they're talking about. I think it's all bullshit. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of that out there. The only person that I think it's not like that is Paramita, and I thought she was one of those when I first joined the forum. Sorry, Paramita, if you're listening to this. But then I start talking to her, and I realize, she reads it because she knows the story and the characters so well. So since then, I've revised my opinions, and maybe there's other Paramitas out there. But the vast majority, I mean, I don't think it's possible. And just the way that they talk about the books, it's always, this is the best thing I've ever read. This is the best thing I read. This is amazing. This is really, I mean, really, yeah. But they tend to have a lot of followers and people who listen to their opinions, and I'm like, why? Please think
Can
for
we
yourself. Go and actually
can
read the
we name
book.
and shame
Sorry, I'm digressing.
of air?
Yeah, sure. I think 75% of them. I think. Well, there's a certain well, there's the. I think there's some people who actually sit down and take the time, but I think these books take time because you're going to read it take Paramitha's she's incredible, but she's very rare. Like
Yeah.
It's her only hobby.
There's
It's
not
the only
many,
thing she does.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think some people who claim to have read like a 900-page book in an afternoon, if you like flip through it, maybe, but if you actually take the time to read it, because there, authors. There's 3 authors here that we're talking to today. Jose, you're an author. It takes time because you take all that time to craft the story, to craft the world. You put so much time and effort into it. And I think it's a little bit insulting to have someone say, "Oh, I read it in an afternoon." But what did you get out of it, though? Really, like, you didn't
Yeah.
swim in it? Like, you just skimmed it at most. But it's kind of sad. Like, someone took so much time to craft the story, to put in all the work, and there's all this work that goes into it that we don't see as readers, but the authors have this big iceberg below the surface that they've put together, and for someone just to skim through it because they want to say they did it, like, it's kind of sad. That, I don't know, it's kind of depressing. Like, enjoy it. Like, someone put so much of their life into it. Yeah.
Funny you mentioned that, because when we were talking to Christopher Rocchio last week, didn't say, Susana, all the Easter eggs and all the references he throws in the books that we didn't pick up, and then he was talking about misquoting Shakespeare, or references to Star Wars, or
Yeah, I picked those up. Yeah. I missed the Star Wars one. I have to go because I've only watched the prequels like once or twice when they came out. So I missed the Star Wars references. But I get the Shakespeare's. I get especially the mythological ones. They're such a delight. He really knows how to play with mythology.
He's on the list.
Yeah.
As is Holly's books and Susana's books.
It's the best thing I've read in years.
By the way, coming back to when I interrupted Holly, I'm sorry. With the 300-page books, Blissful Ignorance is amazing. I mean, you are able to write a book that is grimdark without even knowing the about the genre. Just writing a book out of your own fantasy without that back knowledge of other books, which I tend to like more. Because if I would write something, I have read so many things, I would be like, oh, but that's a reference to this. Oh, that's a reference to that. And I would constantly be stuck with what I'm writing, because everything I write feels like plagiarism of other books I've read. Yeah, it's the feeling I would get, and Holly is in a unique situation for this. Like, he can just write, and
if you can watch my interview with Holly, because the more she was talking, the more and more amazed I was. And I'll say this with her here, without her in front of me, she is amazing, and the way she went about writing her book, and the way it's written, it's just incredible. I mean, hats off, all respect. It's amazing stuff, and I'm really looking forward to picking book 2 this year. I'll stop embarrassing myself now.
No. I mean, and that's what I got from just this conversation. I was like, okay, if you come from that, it's amazing that you wrote 2 books. I mean, I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Don't quite know what to say now.
You could continue your thought if you still have it. The 300 pages, that is your absolute limit, and why?
I mean, I do have problem with like attention and focus, so I struggle to read anyway. So for me, reading has to be sort of a discipline, and it's something I'm really working on this year. So I've actually finished one book this year, and I'm on to my second one. So last year I read 4.5 books in total. Fiction books, non-fiction books, I read a lot more. So for me, the attention is a difficulty. But also, at the risk again of an unpopular opinion, like I appreciate how much other people love world building and all those things that are woven into those, big long books. But for me, I'm like, if you can't tell me the story that you want to tell me in 300 pages, then my attention's going to wander. So I need writing that is really short and sharp. Like I'm a fan of like a very kind of staccato style of writing, but it's just personal taste. It's just the stuff that I kind of get into. One thing I did want to say, though, just to jump back to a point Steve made about people, mentioning these books that everyone is supposed to have read, and it's kind of the in thing to talk about them. There's a really good example of that within the grimdark genre, and that is for maybe the first 2 or 3 years that grimdark became a thing. Every new author that came out, myself included, was either compared to or called the new Joe Abercrombie. Now, I will stand up and I will say there is not a chance in any level of heaven, hell, or earth that I am anything like comparable to Joe Abercrombie. His style is so completely unique, and his style of writing was so new and, sorry, I apologise for my cat, so different that you can't possibly tell me that of the 5,000 grimdark books that got released afterwards, they were all a variation of Joe Abercrombie. What happened was Joe Abercrombie became a huge sensation, and all of a sudden it was the book to read. So, of course, and then everyone started getting tagged in as comparable to this one book. I think that is kind of a really good example of what you're talking about, Steve, where one series or one book suddenly becomes like the go-to for that genre.
But go, Steve. Sorry.
Oh no, it reminds me of everything that was the new Game of Thrones. Like everything is, it's the new game. It's Game of Thrones and whatever. It's like not everything has to be. But I guess it's like a marketing thing to say, oh, it's the new. Some people have said like, oh, it's the Game of Thrones in this setting. It's like not everything has to be that.
But I'm good.
I mean, I'd be looking at. Sorry. I was just saying, I'd sit there and I'd look at these reviews and I'd go, well, either you haven't read Joe Abercrombie or you haven't read my book. You can't have possibly read both.
No, I was going to say that I'm guessing that no author is going to admit that they are chasing a trend, and because grimdark became a thing, that they chose to write in that style. And I would like to think that authors that no one does that. No one decides to change their writing style or to write a particular book because of a particular genre is hot at a particular point in time.
Yes, they do.
That's why I don't read grimdark. You see, I try
to
think highly of people and be positive.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Sorry, Susana. Go ahead.
There are. No, I was just saying there are many at least
because I know of one well-known grimdark author that writes romance, semi-erotica on the side, and they've claimed that they make a lot more money writing that genre, and they pump out the books and they make a lot more money. That's a lot less time spent writing, so they, more power to them if it works. I mean, but their love isn't that. Their love is fantasy. It's not erotica, but they make a lot more money doing it. So it's like, hey, whatever works. Someone's reading it. So
I quite like how when you were talking about erotica, you managed to get the expression "pump out" in there. That's masterfully done, Steve.
Oh no! Oh no! That was bad.
No, but but I get that because the erotica genre is, or the romance genre is the biggest selling genre ever in the history of books, for whatever the reason. So yeah,
Gas station books, right?
yeah.
Airport books.
I wonder what. I'm sure there is such a thing as grimdark
Jesus
erotica. I'm
Christ.
trying to
Really now?
figure it out. How? Well, there. I'm sure if there's
What?
dinosaur erotica, there has to
No,
be grimdark
what?
erotica. And I'm just curious.
Oh, my wife, my wife is a big fan of werewolf
Dinosaur erotica.
So,
No, that.
you know, I'm ashamed to admit. So yeah,
She's
Yeah, I am trying something along those lines under a pen name. It should be out sometime next year. It's gonna. I will try because I need to finance my my regular and regular books. It's
done.
it's going to be my side job. I don't know.
Aha!
writing
It's called
smut.
smut now. It went from erotica to smut.
So you're going to be pumping out the smut this year, are you?
Yeah.
We went from grimdark to smut. Great conversation, Steve.
Yeah.
As always.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
never
I'd
mind.
be curious to hear how that works out, though, because I know, like other authors, you know, they do that.
Yeah. Ask me in a year. Yeah.
Do have a
An
question for you,
interesting
though,
experience.
and you may not have the answer, but just out of curiosity, when that book is ready, how do you plan to promote it, if at all, or are you just going to kind of put it out there and see what happens? Not
Not at all. Yeah. Just put it on Kindle Unlimited and see what happens.
'cause
Yeah.
I do wonder how much. I do wonder how much that matters. You know, I have no experience in it, but I do wonder how much, if certain genres require more of a social media presence and certain genres don't, or if you could just kind of put it out there and pay for some Amazon ads, if that makes a difference, or if that offsets the time spent on social media, or I don't know. I'm curious to hear how that works out.
If I was to give you any advice, and far be it from me to tell anyone what to do, have a chat with Holly Tinsley, the woman with the plan. No, because
Are you referring to like my crazy like boards with like notes and bits of string and things on?
Another.
Jose, are you implying I didn't have a plan when I published?
All I'm saying, I was just about to blow smoke up Holly's behind again to say that in my conversation with her, apart from writing a cracking book, she devoted a lot of time to figuring out where it would fit, how to promote it, who to approach. And I think no, it's obvious that part of her success is both being able to swap from her writer's hat to her marketing hat, and that she clearly spent a lot of time thinking about how to get the book out there. But obviously, she can do a much better job than me telling that story.
I mean, I think
No, to be fair, I did not have a plan for my first book. My plan was to release a good book. I was so, because English is not my first language. I was so wrapped up in the fact that I wanted to publish a book that was well written, that I will get the story across. I didn't realize how important marketing was. I just thought, if I wrote a good book, it would kind of sell, because so that was so everything else came after that. I did learn how to go over things, how to talk to reviewers, how to market myself in the subsequent books. But yeah, that was something I failed miserably at the beginning. But it wasn't my concern. I was picking my battles. I had no idea. I didn't think, and it still pains me today, the fact that I have to promote myself. I just want to promote my work, but that's not how it works,
Yeah, I
sadly.
think Holly had an easier time because her books are definitely. I mean, Grimdark. It's so easy. It promotes itself.
Yeah, I joke and say I should have said it was Grimdark mythology.
Yeah.
That would get me up there, but missed opportunities. I had no idea. Yeah.
So, Holly?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I did have a significant advantage in the fact that I walked into doing this with a not a vast amount, but at least enough knowledge of marketing and experience of like promotion, marketing, networking from my general kind of background and my life and career anyway. I was also very lucky in that, unlike a lot of authors, I had a huge amount of time to dedicate to what I was doing. So when I say about having the crazy board with the bits of string and the post-it notes, that's not an exaggeration. There were times when I would have post-it notes of every chapter on the floor, and I would have reviewers' names on lists, and it became a job for me. But for someone who's got, say, young children, or they've got a full-time job that they've got to pin down and be able to focus on as well, that's not always a possibility. So I completely understand why a lot of authors do go through that experience where they have to launch their book and then go through the process of learning how to promote and, what social media works for them. And the thing about marketing is that there's no right or wrong answer. So what worked for me won't necessarily work for someone else. I get a lot of traction off social media. And I think what a lot of people look for, especially in authors, is that they want to see them being active. So I think there are lots of people who buy into personalities, and I think there are lots of people who promote purely through their books. And I think there are people who kind of fall in between, where, last year I kind of stepped away from social media for a bit, and I really saw a difference in not only my book sales, but just in general on social media. I kind of felt like I fell out of the whole writer scene for a little while. And when I kind of came back into it, I started getting those engagements more. I started interacting with people more. And suddenly kind of conversations would start up again about, do you want to come and like talk to us? Or, oh, I've read your book last week. And I think if that presence works for you, then that's probably the most powerful marketing tool that you can use. I feel like I'm waffling now.
No. It sounds all logic. It's just the thing I think about. The first thing I think about. Then everything you explain is like that is definitely a plan. Just add 50% luck or something to it. I don't know what the percentage of luck is that you need in any occupation.
Hi, huge.
That you want to have some visibility in this world. I mean.
It's huge. You need a lot of luck. It's talking to the right person at the right time, or just writing the right tweet. I don't know. But another thing is, it doesn't matter how popular you get at some point. The moment you stop interacting, engaging, people forget you very quickly.
Yeah.
It's constant, it's ongoing, and it's so time consuming. It works, but
unless you get to that rock
I did not sign up for this
level, that level that everybody wants you, but you don't talk to anybody.
And if you manage to develop that mystique, that some people do it very well, but
so to somehow, more or less, not really bring it back on topic, you talk about staying relevant. You got the trifecta of the three authors that are massively delayed in the book series: George Martin, Patrick Rothfuss, Scott Lynch. Obviously, Martin has stayed very relevant because of the TV show and everything else. Somehow, Patrick Rothfuss has managed to stay relevant, and everyone still talks about that last book for whatever the reason. But Scott Lynch seems to have disappeared. No one really.
He had a burnout, right?
He
He's
has some personal issues that are well documented on the internet. I don't really want to talk about it here,
yeah. I
but
don't know exactly.
but yeah, he had some issues
Hmm.
with someone. But I think book 4 is coming next year finally, but no one is talking about it.
No.
So what? Why? Why someone like Patrick Rothfuss stayed relevant, and someone like Scott Lynch totally disappeared?
Rothfuss is still active on social media, including YouTube and X, I think.
Yeah,
He keeps on.
yeah. It is one of those cases where he is very charismatic, and he was everywhere, not just in writing community, gaming community, and it just has. It can be very engaging when he talks. Yeah, it had that charisma that went along with the books. He knew how to play the game. And I'm using the past tense because I seem to have lost it in recent years. That's the saying. People adore you when you get to that level of fame, but they very quickly they forget or they can turn against you. Um, so
That's what he
it's
got with the.
dangerous. And in the case of Scott Lynch, I mean, now everyone knows his personal troubles. I mean, it shouldn't be the price, to get your book out there. You shouldn't have to expose your personal life. It's very tricky. Had I known what I know today, and I say this a lot, but it's gone now. I would have published under a pen name and never show my face online. Or it would, like in these conversations, I still like to engage. It's not the showing the face online, but I would keep the author separated from the books. I think they would be more successful in my case. I think that the fact that I'm a woman, that I have an accent, that and sometimes blunder, my English is not perfect. It doesn't help
I
sell
think
the
your
books at
problem,
all.
Susanna, is that your name is your real
Such the
name
way.
because it's such a cracking pen name that
I thought it was
Yeah,
the
true.
best
True.
thing I had to work on, but it's just
yeah, that's
nothing.
that. You should just
No
go
one
and say
believes
no.
it,
My
but that's
name
fine.
is
Whatever.
Maria Rodriguez or something like that.
Even that is still a good
Yeah,
pen name.
Right.
sure.
I think
Yeah, don't
it's
get me
tricky
started.
because you invest all this time into platforms that you build a following, and the platform will fall off, and then people leave it and they go to the next platform, and it's kind of like you have to start all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if I was an author, I'd be terrified to go viral, because if you go viral on like TikTok or something and you see a big spike, that drop is inevitable, and the next person will go viral, and everyone will flock to that book. And I know of one author who went viral, and they were really successful. So they pumped out the next book, and then it was kind of crickets because they moved on to something else. So it's a tricky thing where you want to build a following, but at a good, I don't know. I don't have the answers either. I don't know
Or
what
it's
we're
the
talking
waiting
about.
game, like Jenny did. Jenny, where it's. I mean, we didn't have all that internet and stuff like
Yeah,
that way
she's an
back when her books
inspiration.
came out. I heard about her books like way back in the day. I got 1 and 2 then, and then years later suddenly she like explodes onto the scene, and everybody needs those books, and those books are selling like hotcakes. You can get lucky later. It's a game.
No,
Yeah.
I think she worked really hard to be where she is now. Definitely, that's decades of work. It's
And
not
she says
luck.
the same thing, that she would have written under her pen name too, going if she could go back.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that the books are bad, that the luck and stuff. It's just because there wasn't anything before that. She was known, but in in smaller circles than now.
I suppose that's an interesting conversation for another day because Susanna, you're talking about writing as a woman in fantasy, but I suppose, and I'm not trying to do like an aggravation comparison, but that's going to be easier than writing under a male pen name in the romance genre, isn't it? You will never be published as a male writer of romance. I don't think there's ever been one. So,
That is interesting.
but like I said, that's a completely different conversation. But I think we left the Grimdark thing about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I was like,
Because it's
we
all
should go
interesting.
back
It's
to
about
the
books. It's about books.
digressing into
Classic
romance.
Friday conversation, digression.
Excellent.
oh yeah, yeah, classic.
Yeah. I will have a look if there's such thing as Grimdark.
I did look it up.
See what I can find.
Funny enough. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, Steve is already
So
ahead.
apparently the Barrow. Somebody recommended The Steel Remains. Also, Heresy Within by Rob J. Hayes.
Barrow.
Quick question, Steve.
I do know.
Are there male nipples in the covers of these books you're looking at? Because that's the big giveaway.
I can do a quick search.
That's the big giveaway.
Somebody's recommending Beyond Redemption. I don't know. This doesn't sound like a very
This is
good.
I'm hoping this fucks up your algorithm, and now all the recommendations you get
Yeah.
is weird
It's
erotica. It'll be hilarious.
So yeah. I guess what else I wanted to get from everyone was their kind of suggestions. If someone came to you and said, I want to read Grimdark, what would you suggest to them?
I think I'm gonna go first because I said it earlier. Manifest Delusions and Prince of Nothing.
You're going
Yeah. I'm going all the way. Like, let's go hard.
not even being subtle. Yeah.
No.
I cannot possibly answer that question. I haven't read enough, so whatever Jozua
Abercrombie.
says, I stand behind him. Sort of hiding,
That's
covering.
good. That's good. That's fine. Yeah.
I would say
Abercrombie, first one.
See, I would say if you're suggesting Grimdark for people as like an introduction to the genre, people will fall into one of two camps. Either they'll fall into the Abercrombie camp or they'll fall into the Mark Lawrence Prince of Thorns camp. And for me, those are the two kind of intro books that I think gives people a good idea of the genre.
Not bad, but it could have been a plug for you. I mean, my books. You should have said my books.
They're so grim and so dark.
So it was right there.
I know, I'm terrible. I'm terrible at marketing. I don't know what people are talking about.
Steve?
I haven't read any Mark Lawrence, actually. That's something we can talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about it. I guess it qualifies. Yeah. It's funny. Prince of Thorns is almost what I would call
I have all his
Grimdark
books
YA.
in hardcover. I haven't read a single one.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll buy it.
I always confuse them. Prince of Nothing, Prince of Thorns. Like, you know, the titles don't help.
Backer or Lawrence?
Yeah.
Put it like that.
Being intellectually challenged like me doesn't help either. So, again, another trilogy. Who knows? What would you recommend first, Joshua? Prince of Thorns or Prince of Nothing?
That's easy. Prince of Nothing, because that's the one I read. I own the other one.
I'll tell you what, though. There was a time before, so 6 years ago, before I left the UK, where Prince of Thorns was in every, high street bookstore, W.H. Smith, anywhere you went that sold books. Prince of Thorns was there on the shelves, whereas you wouldn't necessarily find any of the Grimdark stuff. So there must be something to it, maybe.
Yeah, I bought them because they were cheap.
Ever the discerning reader.
I did the same for Empires of Dust. I think I
Huh.
paid £3 per book. I did the same for War for the Rose Thorn. I mean, if I can find it cheap, I will buy it. Yes.
And
I
read
like
it
to
like
have a library, like look around and go like, oh, I'm gonna read this today. I mean, who doesn't? No, no, nobody.
They keep me warm at night. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I think if it's someone who isn't too like a new reader who hasn't read a whole lot, I think I'd probably recommend First Law to them just because it's accessible, it's easy to get into,
Yeah,
they can dip their toes in. But Prince of Nothing might be kind of tough. I think it depends on the reader. I think it's certain people just won't won't get into it, even though I like it. I think it's very hit or miss. But
Yeah.
I think just to spite Joshua, but best served cold because it's a standalone, and for me was the better out of all the standalones, and you don't have to invest the time that it takes to read a trilogy. I think best served
It's
cold
the
might be a
easiest one to get into of the standalones.
yeah
It's the easiest one.
yeah yeah. I think for me, and I've read very little, but if I was to recommend, it's just a book. So
Yeah. What are the other two? Red Country and
heroes.
what?
Heroes.
Heroes. Those
Heroes.
two are more tied to the first trilogy, as in well established characters. There's also in Best Served Cold, but it's the story in itself is easier to follow. Like you can read that book and never read another Abercrombie book ever again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fun. Yeah. As in typical fashion, we always get sidetracked a little bit, but we think we did pretty good. I mean, we got sidetracked for about
If
20,
people
30
don't
minutes.
know
So
what
that's not bad.
Grimdark is by now, we waste their time again.
Well, if they do have their own definition, it's probably different than all of ours. So,
That's wrong.
yeah. That's why it's fun. That's why it's fun to talk about because there's just no right or wrong answer. Everyone has their own definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same for dark fantasy or what is considered, something that is romantic or everyone is gonna pick those elements or those characters, their favorite tropes. That yeah, what is dark for me is not the same. That's all right.
Well, cool. Yeah, it's the time flew by as usual. It's almost 2 hours, but yeah, I'm glad we finally got a chance to talk. It's sad Parmitha didn't visit because I know she's wanted to talk Grimdark with us, but
Yeah.
maybe next time. But in the meantime, Holly, where can people find you and your books? Be sure and plug your books.
Okay, I will do some actual marketing now. So if you want to find me, best places on Twitter, which is where I spend far too much of my time. It's at Holly Tinsley, and the Ian Tinsley is a 3. My books are on Amazon. So there's the Vanguard Chronicles, which is We Men of Ash and Shadow, The Hand That Cast the Bone. The third book is currently in the works, and I have a book coming out on the 22nd of March this year called The Hallows, which is a standalone in a completely new world, which I am very excited to get out.
It's on my Kindle, waiting to be read. And Joshua.
Oh, the nerds.
No, fine. And Joshua.
Yeah, you can find me on the page chewing forums. Ta-da!
Yeah. And Susana, tell us about you and your books.
So my books, my series is then Timelessness, and they can be found everywhere: Amazon, Kobo, Apple, available on ebook, paperback, and audiobook, which I recommend. It's my favorite version. The first book is called Weird Gods. You can't miss it. And I have a new book in the same universe coming out in March called Oublié. It's a standalone novel. And yeah, go check it out. It's now available for pre-order on
I have
Amazon.
my pre-order ready for that too. I'm ready to go. And Jose.
Awesome.
Best place to find me is on my YouTube channel, Jose's Amazing Worlds, and also the page Twin Forums.
Awesome. Well, thank all of you for hanging out with me today. It's been fun. We'll do it again soon.
I love these Friday evenings.
Thanks for
Thank
making
you
it.
having me.
So I hope everyone has a great weekend, and we'll talk very soon.
Thank you.
Bye.